Once upon a time, I was minding my own business looking for a new video topic to research. I've been hearing a lot of talk on birth order, how the order in which you're born into a family can determine your personality. So I wanted to kind of do like a little bit of a lit review for you guys. I wanted to answer the question, does the order in which you're born into a family determine the way your personality turns out? This will be a quick video, I said. Probably won't even last 10 minutes, I said. And then, bam, I stumbled across something that I could have never foreseen. It turns out this is a topic that has been fraught with drama in the scientific community. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through it and also answer the question, does birth order influence personality? Before we get into that, I would love to hear your thoughts on this question, so pop those in the comments below. A timeline of events. In 1928, a psychologist by the name of Adler started to theorize that birth order could play a role in children's personality development. And people ate this up. Why, you might ask? Well, it turns out a lot of people want it to be true that who we become in life is largely dictated by factors outside of our control, particularly the way that we grew up in our families. When people want this to be true very, very strongly, I almost think of it as like kind of a form of psychological astrology. They want something about the circumstances of their birth to explain the way that they are. Not only do you get to feel like the circumstances around your birth shaped you, you also kind of get to feel relinquished in responsibility. You can just say, well, I'm the youngest child, so I'm irresponsible. That's just the way we are. For example, take a look at the language used in this TEDx talk. You've been secretly programmed for great success. You've also been programmed for stress and conflict. How? It happened during your childhood, and you had no choice or control over it. Trained therapist and business consultant Pavel Mishenko will explain how to unlock the mysteries of your birth order habits. As I'm recording this morning I went to a doctor's appointment, and I got some news that was less than favorable. It's fine, but it's just like, it wasn't what I wanted to hear. It was something that I'd never thought about before, and I asked the doctor, is this something that I brought on to myself, and is there something that I can do moving forward to prevent this from getting worse? And basically the gist of it was, no, it's nothing that you did, and there's nothing you can do moving forward that we know of. And I was trying to think afterwards. I was like, is it a good thing or a bad thing that the doctor told me I don't have any responsibility or control over this thing? On one hand, having responsibility can be a good thing. It means that you can control what happens to you. But on the other hand, if it's something outside of your control, you get to feel like you didn't do anything wrong. You get to feel like there's nothing you can do, and there's a little bit of freedom in that. Feeling not responsible for the things that happen to us feels very good. It appeases our anxiety and our guilt. It's much harder to sit with the ramifications of something knowing that you played a part in it. All this to say, I think there's a reason why we as a culture are so drawn to explanations for human behavior that cut out willpower. Now, in the 1990s, a researcher and psychologist by the name of Frank Sulloway came into the scene with a $500,000 book deal, which he used to write a book on birth order effects. Firstborns, he said, are more assertive, ambitious, and conforming, while laterborns are more adventurous and rebellious. Well, he largely based his theories on evolutionary psychology, and he said that older children tend to be like a second parent, absorbing their parents' more conservative values, whereas the younger ones try to distinguish themselves through creativity and rebelliousness. Older kids also, because they are more dominant, are less agreeable. But not everybody was too happy with Sulloway's claims. Research that attempted to replicate his findings was inconsistent until recently. Some studies supported his theory, while others did not. Some researchers criticized him for failing to control for age and for social background. Now, age is really important when we're talking about birth order effects, because of course, younger kids are going to be less responsible, more rebellious. That's kind of the nature of being a kid. If you compare a 6-year-old with an 18-year-old, of course the 6-year-old is going to seem more aligned with that description. A man named Alan Wolfe went and called him immodest, bombastic, ambitious, combative, defensive, and culturally biased for assuming that all families throughout history have had the same structure. And I hate to say it, but when you hear how Sulloway responded to his critics, probably gonna agree with him. Now, Sulloway has said that he's not bothered by the critics. They just have axes to grind and were likely just born angry. He's also been quoted as comparing himself to Tom Cruise and his critics as random nobodies who, I guess, want to pick at Tom Cruise. I especially love this description of him from one article. Sulloway's intense focus becomes clear within minutes of meeting him. He is angry about what has happened and harbors a deep disdain for his critics, which he doesn't attempt to hide. They are unsophisticated detail freaks, he says, who are unable to grasp, replicate, or even understand the way he put his book together. He speaks of his detractors as if they were third-tier nuisances with insubstantial and irritating complaints, and says he is not alone in his thinking. Yikes. Unfortunately, he adds, his critics don't even have the minimal statistical skills needed to challenge his work. This is a theme to which Sulloway and his supporters are sticking. They make much ado of credentials or lack thereof, noting that this is the case of non-pedigreed folks going after one of academia's brightest lights. It's like being Tom Cruise or somebody else, and people start going after you the way they go after stars in the tabloids, Sulloway says. For the record, we talk a lot about misinformation on this channel. And I just want to mention, not having a degree in something, not having formal training in something, does not mean that a person doesn't have something of value to say. What determines whether someone has something of value to say is what they are actually saying. Now, a case can be made when people say stupid shit. If it comes from a place of not being educated, I think it's fair game to say, listen, you're not educated on this. You clearly don't know what you're talking about. But simply silencing people by saying, well, you're not a superior to me, it's a very cheap blow, and it's a very easy way to just silence someone without interacting with their argument. Now, let me tell you a story. Disclaimer before we get started. Given that some of the characters in the story have proven themselves to be quite litigious, let me just clarify. The following skit is for comedic effect. It is filled with hyperbole and drama. It is not meant to be an accurate representation of what went down. For those of you not familiar, let me familiarize you with the word satire, the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize someone's stupidity or vices. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Good evening, my name is Jackie Daytona.
Jackie Daytona.
Good evening, I'm Frank Sulloway. I wrote a book, and it's all about how birth order determines your personality.
I'm Frederick Townsend. I read your book, and I disagree with it. I believe it's flawed. Here's an article explaining why.
Why, that buffoon, what does he know?
Something's still not right here. Must be something I'm not understanding. I gotta get my hands on that data. Hello? Frank Sulloway? Could you please send me your data when you have a chance? I'd like to take a closer look at the research.
You, sir, are a fool, I do declare. Do you even understand statistics? Did you even go to Harvard? Do you even have a PhD? Who are you to question me? These statistical analyses are so above your mortal comprehension, you can't even begin to challenge me.
Oh, I see how it is. In that case, bring it on, bucko. I'm gonna call you out even harder.
Hi guys, I'm Gary Johnson. I'm here to help publish Frederick Townsend's critique. Now Frank, let's be reasonable here. Dissent is healthy in the scientific community. Well yes, but dissent from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. You know what? This is libel. I've been informed by 2 different lawyers of it. And my friends agree with me. Joan agrees with me. Jerry agrees with me. Johnny agrees with me, all of whom are professors and academics. Brian agrees with... Okay, fine, we don't want you to sue us. Why don't we just let Frederick rewrite his critique then? Alright, but you'll make sure to include the disclaimer at the top, right? The disclaimer that says this is complete hogwash? No, why would I agree to that? Because he's soiling my reputation. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
Alright, I have rewritten the manuscript to incorporate your feedback.
No, what is this? You completely changed it. How are me and my friends going to critique it now that you completely rewrote it? What is this? You sent him the letter that I sent you in confidence? That's copyright infringement. It's illegal. That's it. I'm reporting you, Johnson. You know what? I'm launching a complaint against you too for falsifying data. Okay, in all seriousness now, let me walk you through what actually happened in this conflict. To the best of my ability. Allegedly. Please don't sue me, I'm just a silly little girl. I can't even begin to understand statistical analyses involved in this. This statistics thing is just so above my head. Frederick Townsend, a commodity trader who studied birth order in college, wrote a critique of Sulloway's book. He said that Sulloway selected data points to produce supportive figures, misused study results, and manipulated personality characteristics of famous studied people. Afterwards, Townsend still felt like he had missed something, and he requested to see the data for himself. Johnson's response was, well, definitely not unbothered. He responded, regarding your book review, it is inaccurate, scurrilous, and offensive to the highest degree. I have always found it regrettable that some some people possess a strong need to denigrate the efforts of other scholars using blatantly ad hominem tactics, sarcasm, slurs, slippery and misleading arguments, and reckless accusations, presumably in an effort to make themselves appear smarter than the individual they have chosen to criticize. You have identified yourself, moreover, as a kind of small-minded and ill-informed crank. Incidentally, you might want to try to get your money back from speed-reading guru Evelyn Wood. So Townsend did decide to publish a follow-up critique. Gary Johnson, the editor of the journal, decided to publish Townsend's follow-up critique. And Sulloway was not very happy with that. Sulloway believed Townsend's critique was inflammatory and libelous. He threatened legal action. It would be unfortunate if your decision to publish Townsend's manuscript in its present form plunges you and your journal into serious legal difficulties. Sounds a little bit threatening, wouldn't you say? I am prepared to take any legal steps that are necessary to protect this reputation from potential libel. Sulloway also made the highly unusual demand that Townsend's critique be prefaced with a disclaimer no editor would agree to, basically saying that the article was hogwash. Since Sulloway asked for the critique to be revised so as to not be libelous, Townsend went ahead and did that. But Sulloway perceived this an attempt on Johnson's part to undercut him. To undercut the process by allowing Townsend to revise his article after the commentators had written responses to the original critique. In 1999, when Sulloway was pushed to finally give way how he conducted his analysis, he responded to Townsend that he was under no obligation to make any of this research available to unqualified individuals, including people lacking graduate degrees in the behavioral sciences and a serious record of scholarly publications. The way he reacted to this only deepened Johnson's and Townsend's skepticism as to whether he had something to hide. Johnson said, "The evasiveness, the varying methodological accounts, the data discrepancies, and the seemingly desperate attempts to interfere with publication together suggest that an independent review of Sulloway's research should be undertaken." Sulloway claims that he never tried to legally threaten them in order to stall the publication, though he acknowledged in his 1999 letter to Johnson that it may have been a little bit too strongly worded. In the end, he reported Johnson, and Johnson reported him. Sulloway wrote to the president of the Editors' University, saying, "I intend to file charges of misconduct against one of your faculty members, Gary R. Johnson. These allegations include, but are not necessarily limited to, defamation and libel, false light invasion of privacy, fraud, promissory estoppel," I don't even know this word, my tiny brain, "and breach of fiduciary duty. I will also be blowing the whistle by filing formal charges of scientific misconduct against Gary Johnson with the American Political Science Association, the Human Behavior and Evolution Society, members of Congress who have shown a concern about science fraud, and all other professional organizations with which Professor Johnson or his journal are affiliated." Now, I went to Sulloway's, I don't know what you would call it, blog website, where he actually gives a rundown of his narration of events, and I nearly gave myself ocular damage trying to read it because it's literally spread out on the entire screen, so you have to look like this the entire time, but I read it, and I just wanted to highlight some parts that I thought were interesting to note. Particularly, I was interested in the way he spoke about his critics and the way he framed things in very extreme terms, positioning himself as a victim who needed to defend himself, allegedly. He described Frederick Townsend as a commodities trader and lawyer who appears to have little or no advanced training in behavioral science or statistics, much less the complicated methods of meta-analysis, and despite this he felt qualified to write a review of his book, which purported to make important criticisms to his methods and results. Not understanding the complexities of the various statistical procedures he used, Townsend resorted to numerous unscientific, intemperate, and wild assertions. He later said Townsend had expanded his naive and misguided statistical comments into a larger manuscript. It also contained at least one wild, clearly defamatory statement. Townsend's mistaken analyses and defamatory claims were based on his failure to understand even the most basic statistical methods, as well as his failure to consult relevant scientific publications. He said, "I realized he had stepped over the line between misguided criticism and out-and-out libel." Meanwhile, he described Johnson's behavior as unfair and biased. "The deck was stacked from the beginning. The mere publication of such defamatory accusations can damage an innocent person's reputation. Scientists are particularly vulnerable to such smear tactics, as their profession is that of searching for the truth. Even entirely false allegations of sloppiness or intentional wrongdoing can besmirch a scholar's reputation and cast doubt on the credibility of that scientist's work. Hence, editors have a professional responsibility not to recklessly publish unsubstantiated accusations, especially those that are being made by individuals who lack the training and expertise to judge the underlying work. He again described unfair elements of the format. He said that several journal editors agreed with him about the unfair nature. He was concerned about the potential harm to his reputation if he was to be falsely portrayed as having tried to squash publication of another person's intellectual criticisms. No, I think it's very clear to us all that he would never do that. He said that 2 lawyers informed him that the manuscript was libelous, and 4 respected journal editors told him that it contained language and assertions that were unacceptable in a scientific publication and also appeared to them libelous. I always think it's funny when people make their argument by saying, well, this person who's a source of authority agrees with me. Like, that's not an argument. That's not anything that people should listen to. If you have an actual argument for why you disagree with something, then say it. Give the specifics of what was said and what exactly you disagree with and provide your evidence. Don't just say, well, this person who's smarter than you agrees with me that I'm right. Again, Sulloway expressed that he felt like Johnson created an inequitable format and had a distinctly negative bias towards him from the start, and that it was potentially prejudicing responses by the commentators. He described Johnson's behavior as illegal and said that Johnson got on his high horse and launched a self-righteous defense that he was trying to interfere with the progress of science and trying to suppress free speech. This was absurd. Yeah, it's really absurd. He also was very angry that a letter he had apparently sent to Johnson was given from Johnson to Townsend, and he said that this was a betrayal of his confidence because Townsend was then able to incorporate changes in his manuscript to dodge the issues. He says, not only was this an apparent breach of editorial neutrality and responsibility, but I suspect it was illegal and certainly unethical, i.e. editorial misconduct, to circulate his unpublished scientific thoughts and allow them to be used without acknowledgement by Townsend. He finally protested to his superiors at the university, stating that his actions rose to the level of misconduct, and took steps under the state of Michigan's Whistleblower Protection Act, trying to halt the retaliation that had started and continues to this day. He also laments the fact that he didn't get the last word. Did I get the last word as promised? Having waited 3 years to publish, Johnson took it upon himself to write a tendentious and scathing editorial blaming me for everything, taking no responsibility for his own part in this sorry saga of unprofessional and biased editorial process. Gee, for somebody who's all for free speech, sure seems to have issues with people expressing dissent. He was also displeased that Johnson carefully selected portions of his letter to him to give a misleading portrayal of his opposition in this controversy. One of the most infuriating aspects of this editorial was Johnson's attempt to portray me as trying to silence my critics by stifling freedom of speech through legal threats. I mean, if somebody's quoting you and it sounds like you're threatening them in order to silence them, I don't think you can really say that they twisted your words if they're just quoting you. They threatened legal action. It would be unfortunate if your decision to publish Townsend's manuscript in its present form plunges you and your journal into serious legal difficulties. Again, he really took issue with not having the last word. Johnson's editorial attack on me constitutes breach of promise, since I was assured in writing that if I participated, I would have the last word in the exchange. And in the end, Johnson filed a complaint of misconduct against him. The complaint alleged that he had manipulated and falsified data, and in the end, it seems like he was cleared of that. Sulloway said that 20 years from now, he hopes people will see that he was basically right and the others were on the wrong track. Well, 27 years later, that aged really poorly. Birth order effects have since been debunked by massive meta-analyses. In 2015, a meta-analysis of 20,000 adults came in and really tried to get at the bottom of the scientific debate. Firstborns were slightly higher in intelligence, I'm talking by 1.5 points. There were no birth order effects for extroversion, emotional stability, agreeableness, conscientiousness, or imagination, which contradicts previous scientific and lay theories. In summary, researchers concluded that a person's personality is not as much influenced by their family and particularly their birth order as was previously thought. Then in 2015, an even larger study, and one of the researchers I'm pretty sure is Romanian. Her name's Damian. She's got to be Romanian, so love that for her. Looked at 337,000 students, and they found that aside from minuscule differences in intelligence, meaning the older one was smarter by 1 IQ point, not even 1.5, birth order has little or no substantive effect on personality. So in the end, it doesn't look like Sulloway's research was supported. And while there isn't, as far as I can tell, any evidence that he falsified his data, his extreme defensiveness when faced with dissent is something that I think we can learn a lot from. Be very wary of people who are more interested in being right than in getting at the truth. And never assume that just because somebody has a specific title, a specific degree, a specific association, or the respect of his peers, that that person's scientific research is gospel. If they speak about science in absolute terms, if they get defensive and angry when their theories are called into question, and if they try to silence dissent with legal threats, allegedly, red flag. Remember that science is not a god. I keep seeing this sign on the highway in Seattle. On somebody's building, it says science is God. And I really take issue with this because religion is based on blind faith, and the scientific method is anything but. The scientific method is humble. The scientific method says that we don't really know what the truth is. We can keep trying to chip away at it and hope that over time we get a better idea of what the truth is. But we have to understand that future studies can debunk what we're currently finding out. There's always contradiction in the research. It's very nuanced. It's not black and white. If you treat science as your God, then you deviate from the scientific method by definition. And even the two meta-analyses that I mentioned today, who knows, maybe in another 27 years, those will be debunked as well. We need to be careful about the language we use around science because, again, it's not black and white. And if we say this is absolutely the way things are today, tomorrow when something proves us wrong, we're going to sound really stupid. And what about birth order? What is the TLDR on that? The bottom line is that at this time, our best evidence suggests that birth order effects are not a thing. And here's where I think the birth order theory went wrong. I don't deny that parents probably treat their kids differently based on what order they were born in. I've been around enough people to hear from them that, the way their parents raised their siblings was different from the way that they were raised themselves. And I believe them on that. It makes sense. Where I think the theory goes wrong is in assuming that all children will react exactly the same way to these differences in parenting styles and these differences in rules in the system. This, in my opinion, is what is driving the schism between research that supported Sulloway's claims and research that did not support Sulloway's claims. Although many kids have shared experiences in their birth order, those experiences do not sentence them to become a certain way. I recently heard this anecdote of two sons who were talking about their alcoholic father. One of the sons is alcoholic himself, the other one doesn't drink. And the non-alcoholic son asks his alcoholic sibling, "Why do you drink?" And his sibling says, "Because Dad did." "Why don't you drink?" And his sibling says, "Because Dad drank." What determines who you become in life is not your life experiences, is not the family that you were born with. What determines who you are in life is what you choose to make with those experiences. Do you know one of the biggest predictors of whether a boy will turn out to be abusive like his abusive father? Whether he identifies with him. When kids are faced with something that their parent does, they most of the times either say, "I'm going to be exactly like that," or "I'm going to completely shun that." The moral of the story is that our experiences don't sentence us to a certain fate. How we relate to those experiences and how we make meaning of them is what does. So just be careful about how you think and talk about the things that happen to you. Be careful who you identify with, whose personality you integrate into your own. And while we're on the subject, yes, also be careful what you tell yourself about birth order, because this might seem not that important, like it's not going to impact your life that much, but at the end of the day, it is a form of stereotyping, and self-fulfilling prophecies are very real. I hope this was a fun watch for you, and take care.